afternoon, everyone. We're standing here today at Livonia Center Cemetery, which is located on Farmington Road between 5 Mile and Schoolcraft. This cemetery is one of our 4 historic cemeteries. It was founded in 1836. The township is actually composed of a number of villages that most people today are not familiar with. Where the cemetery stands is in the township, is in the small town of Livonia Center. Livonia Center was a very tiny little town, only about 50 people. This little town of Livonia Center is so slow to develop, it's one of the reasons we don't have a downtown. But we had some very interesting people who helped make Livonia what it is today, and I would like to introduce you to a number of them, starting with our town's official bad boy.
I am Horace Kingsley. Although considered by some as the black sheep of the family, I am the patriarch of the Kingsley family. My father, Nathan Kingsley, who built the Kingsley home in 1843, and the same year he married Mary Grace, my mother.
Horace is the eternal bad boy. He was always getting himself into trouble. His parents were very good people. Nathan and Mary Kingsley built a small house near the corner of 5 Mile and Farmington.
The house is now located at historic Greenmead. If you have an opportunity to see it, please do. You'll see the house that I grew up in.
They had 4 children. Horace and his sister Emma survived.
From the beginning, no one appreciated my effort to become a successful man. At 16, I was already a clever, resourceful, charming, and thoughtful person, destined not to be a simple farmer, but a rich businessman, a wealthy entrepreneur. So I always avoided doing anything that I did not want to do, especially anything associated with farming, to pursue more profitable things.
Emma married a very nice man named Joe McEachran, and they lived on the farm and helped her parents as they got older. Horace, on the other hand, got into so much trouble that Nathan and Mary left the property to Emma.
And just because I left farming to the other family members, I was called Horrible Horace behind my back.
How could he defend having seances?
I was thoughtful. I could have told him it was a scam. I could have told him it was all a hoax, but that wouldn't be right. I gave them solace, peace of mind, knowing that their loved one was in heaven or someplace at rest. Besides, I was making too much money.
Watering the milk.
Now, in an effort to reduce overhead expenses and increase profits by putting a little water in the milk cans we delivered to the cheese factory down the road, I was considered a crook. All I was doing was reducing costs to make more profits for the farm.
His very bad carpentry jobs.
Even after I made perfect coffins for 4 of my 5 children who died in the diphtheria in 1887, I was accused of being a shoddy carpenter because I used inferior work and cut corners in building things in town to increase my profits. Business is business.
He sold land that he shouldn't have sold.
Because Charlotte was so overwhelmed by the deaths of our children, I left her at the farm and moved to Detroit in an apartment to start a carpentry business. But once established, I realized Charlotte was unable to work on the farm. So we sold the farm and I had her committed to Eloise State Mental Hospital for care. Yet, instead of appreciating my kindness and taking care of her mother, Gertrude, my only remaining child, considered me a scoundrel because I kept all the money. Well, it was only fair. She's being taken care of. She's going to be waited on hand and foot. What's the problem?
He was a schemer and a scammer and got into all kinds of trouble.
Then in 1928, now a successful businessman, complete with my Packard Roadster and dabbling in the up-and-coming real estate booming coming into Livonia, I heard that my sister Emma, my last surviving sibling, who inherited my father's farm, had a problem running it. So I considered selling it for her. I first considered selling the farm and taking only 60% of the profit for myself, the standard 10% sales commission and 50% for the inheritance that I was entitled. Then I decided I would just obtain the deed without her knowledge and sell it without her involvement. After all, it should have belonged to me anyway. I am the son, not the daughter. Women don't need that. Well, While driving to the old homestead to obtain the deed, because I knew what drawer it was in, my Packard Roadster stalled on the railroad tracks. The last thing I remember while trying to start the car was a loud, thunderous noise, and then a bright light. And that ended my story. That's it.
Next, I'd like to take you to meet another young man who maybe got in trouble in a slightly different way, but with good intentions.
I'm Edwin Milord. I'm Michigan 30th Infantry, Company C. My unit was enlisted November of 1864.
Edwin was basically 17 when he joined the military. I've tried very hard to figure out his age because the tombstone is badly damaged. But best guess is that Edwin signed up a little too early. He did not wait till his 18th birthday, but was just quite anxious to be with his friends and neighbors, signing up for this regiment because this would have been his last chance to fight in the war.
A lot of my friends and family had already enlisted, including my brother Hiram, and my grandfather had been a war hero in the Revolutionary War. Our unit mustered out to Detroit in 1865. We were stationed along the Detroit River as a garrison to protect against enemy attack from Canada. It was thought among the Union higher-ups that the Confederacy would attempt to attack through Canada, which was neutral at the time, and flank the Union from the north.
He was one of 8 children. He was the youngest of the 8 children, and his older brother Hiram was off with the famous Michigan 24th, known as the Iron Brigade. So I'm sure Edwin had heard all the tales and just wanted to be where everybody else was. Unfortunately, it cost him his life.
Our unit only ever saw a small amount of battle, including a small battle on the river in which the Confederacy captured 2 steamboats and attempted to take the USS Michigan. Thankfully, that was repelled without any casualties. However, towards the winter of 1865, there was several outbreaks of measles and mumps among our unit. It spread through the barracks like fire, and we all knew the signs, we'd all seen the symptoms, and we'd all seen the fever, the cough, and the rash that spread throughout the body. And 18 of us ended up dying before the end of 1865, myself included.
The reason I chose Edwin is because I wanted to celebrate those soldiers who served in Michigan, who never left the state, but served equally along with the soldiers who served in the major battles like Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville, Gettysburg. These soldiers served too, and they deserve to be remembered.
We're very thankful to the efforts of the people today to repair the stones. As you can see, my stone has been damaged and repaired. There's a line across it in the plaster, and we've also received another stone from Arlington National Cemetery, courtesy of the national government.
Well, now that we've seen Edwin's story and we understand a little bit more about our soldiers that served in Michigan, I'd like to introduce you to somebody who didn't serve in the war, but she has her story to tell. I always call her the weeping widow because her story is so sad.
My name is Jane Shaw Ewing, and I was born in January 1801 in Londonderry, Ireland.
Jane's story is one of the ones that we find very interesting because Jane is a survivor. Jane Shaw Ewing left Ireland at a time when Ireland was certainly at its worst.
Between 1841 and 1851, there was a huge amount of people that came out of Ireland, but they were very poor, they had no money, they had no education, they had very few clothes. Sadly for me, in 1845, my darling husband, Samuel, died. Now here I was, a widow with 5 wee bairns. My brother William had come with his family to the Livonia area, and he became a farmer. and he had a large, large farm south of the cemetery here. Well, in 1855, he helped me get passage on the Columbia.
People were starving all over the place. She was very lucky that her brother was able to send her the money to come over here. But Jane not only comes over and she survives the death of her son, the death of her daughter, but she makes a life for herself. She started a farm of her own, and she succeeded as a woman, an Irish woman in a time when Irish women were hated, on her own, creates a farm, makes a living, and does quite well for herself.
Well, life went on, but unfortunately, at the age of 77, I met my demise, and so here I lie for all eternity. And that is my story.
She's a good role model, I think, for a lot of women who are in that same type of a situation. Well, we're going to leave Jane now and her story, and I want to take you over to hear a really fun story, because this family helps change Livonia from a farming community to an industrial community, and the product that they choose is one that I don't think most people would think of. Most people don't realize it, but in the 1800s, Livonia was famous for cheese, in particular cheddar cheese.
I'm Minerva Gardner Cater Smith, and I'm here with my in-laws, the Cater family.
The Caters came here from upstate New York, where they were part of a very large Dutch community, and they brought their Dutch family traditions with them in terms of what they were going to farm and produce. Along the way, this family, who descends from a Revolutionary War ancestor, comes here, and their goal is to make cheese.
We were prominent in our farm of raising milk and butter and starting a local cheese industry. George, in 1876, started a small store and had a patent with the U.S. Patent Office for the Better Butter Box. Now, the idea with the Better Butter Box was to make a more sanitary carrier for butter. You could put 1 pound of butter in and push it into the box, put a separation, put another pound of butter, put another wood separator, and keep on going until the box was full. You only had to open up the box to expose the butter that was sold.
We had his wife Minerva tell the story of George and the rest of the family, because she's connected not only with his cheese factory, but she's connected with the later cheese factory that belongs to Asa B. Smith.
Peter, being the father of the family, probably distributed that land to his brothers after the death of my husband George. So Minerva ended up with absolutely nothing. But in 1884, she met a lovely man by the name of Asa B. Smith. They were married, and after they were married, they continued and started a big cheese factory and program within that area. The area became known as the Gilt Edge.
It was called Gilt Edge because that was what was called the rind of the cheese. We have about 7 or 8 other families that are also making cheese. This turns Livonia into the largest cheese-producing city in the state of Michigan.
The big cheese factories in the area were eventually sold to Governor Warner. Milk produced by Cammie Shaw and the Simmons family were used to produce cheese and make Livonia the cheese center of Michigan. In fact, it became the cheese capital, and Livonia cheese moved all across the nation.
Well, now I would like to introduce you to a very special lady. I would like to introduce you to the First Lady of Livonia, our very, very First Lady.
My name is Emma Butterfield Bringham, and I am the wife of Aaron Adolphus Bringham. He prefers to go by Adolphus.
Our First Lady of Livonia, Emma Bringham, must have been very grateful when Livonia became a township in 1835, because for the 20 years prior to that, we were part of a larger township. We were known for a while as Buckland Township, and all the township meetings were held down in Dearborn. Not such a problem these days with cars, but in those days, Farmington Road was non-existent, and it was a 14-mile walk to Dearborn for every meeting. So it was probably a bit of a relief to her when her husband no longer had to travel all the way to Dearborn.
The first township meeting was held at the Jocelyn Farm. That's the farm that was owned by John Jocelyn, and we were at the Tamarack Schoolhouse. During this meeting, the name of the township was decided. It was decided that it would be Livonia Center. This name was after two of the provinces in Western Russia, but there is also a Livonia Center in New York, where a number of the settlers came from. When the township election was held, Adolphus was voted township supervisor. He was township supervisor in 1835, 36, 37, and 38. He got to oversee joyously Michigan moving from a territory to a state when we attained statehood on January 25th, 1837.
They lived near the corner of 5 Mile and Farmington. Eventually, though, they did move to Waterford. Waterford is best known for Meade's Mill, which was a mill in the area, which was a very large mill, and also for being a major stop on the Underground Railroad. There is a little bit of information that says that there was a good chance that they were involved in the Underground Railroad while in Waterford.
What a lot of people don't know is that Livonia Center, specifically the southern part along the Rouge River, was part of the Underground Railroad, which had started in 1829 and lasted until 1862.
Well, although Emma and her husband did move to Waterford, and Emma later went to live with her children in another state, it was extremely important to Emma that she came back here to Livonia because she and her husband had put their heart and soul into developing this township, where she saw this area grow from wilderness into a township and into a town that was important in the state of Michigan. Well, you've met Horace, and now it's time, I think, to meet Horace's in-laws. I have a feeling they're not going to say a lot about Horace because I don't think they want to admit that they're related to him. But they have some other relatives that they would surely like you to know about and they'd like to brag about because they are proud grandparents. Most people wonder why Livonia Schools has honored statesmen and poets with the names of their schools, and then one school stood out among all the others, which was Bentley's High School.
I'm George Nelson Bentley. This is my wife Elizabeth. Our firstborn son, George Nelson Bentley, was killed July 1st, 1863 at Gettysburg. Ironically, exactly 12 years after the fateful day, our second son presented us with a grandson who was born July 1st, 1875. And that is the George Nelson Bentley we are here to honor today.
George Bentley is buried in Riverside Cemetery in Plymouth. So we asked his grandparents to tell that story to everyone today. The Bentleys lived down near the far southwest corner of Livonia. They lived close to the corner of 5 Mile and Inkster. They lived in a section of Livonia that we refer to now as Elm Station. It's one of those small towns that has disappeared. The family lived a very quiet life, but they produced this extraordinary human being who changed the way schools were, not just in Livonia, but really all over the state of Michigan.
Our little grandson was a very bright child and excelled at academics. When it was time to go to high school, the township did not have a high school. So he went to school in Plymouth, Michigan. He finished in 3 years rather than the usual 4. and then went on to the University of Michigan, where the tuition was $30 a year. He eventually came back to Livonia, bringing his new and charming wife. He purchased a general store and was a shopkeeper for a while and served on the school board. He basically did away with one-room schools.
He helped us create this more complex school system whereby children worked with children of their own age.
He also helped to consolidate all of the schools in Livonia Township.
And he brought us high schools, which we didn't have before, enabling students not to have to travel to other towns to go to high schools.
He also founded the first high school in the township and served as its principal. And he added diplomas for the graduating seniors.
George comes from a simple family but makes a huge difference. Livonia Center Cemetery is home to a number of soldiers. We have a small memorial here dedicated to all soldiers who fought for the United States. We're going to go visit two men who fought in the Civil War for two very different reasons, but both of whom made major contributions.
My name is George Hawkins. I was born here in this community of Livonia on January 30th, 1839. There was a great deal of fervor and excitement here in Michigan when President Lincoln called for 75,000 troops to put down the rebellion. I, like many of my other fellow neighbors, joined the Union Army. On May 22nd, 1861, I enlisted in the Company F of the 2nd Michigan Regiment. Now, Company F was not only noted for its men, but there was a particular person within our ranks by the name of Franklin Thompson. We all thought Franklin was just another member of our unit, and I thought for sure he was just a young man with lack of facial hair. But it turned out that Franklin was actually a woman. Her name was Sarah Emma Edmonds, and she served with her husband in Company F. In 1861, we participated in the first Battle of Manassas. There we thought that would be the only battle, but it turned out not to be so. We scattered back to Washington in defeat. In 1862, under George McClellan, we participated in the Peninsula Campaign. After 7 days of hard fighting, we were this close to capturing Richmond. But we left there again in defeat and marched back to Washington. Later that summer, we participated in the Second Battle of Bull Run, again, another Union defeat. In 1863, the 2nd Michigan was transferred over to the Western Theater under General Grant. There, we proceeded down to Vicksburg, Mississippi, and for 3 months, our Army laid siege to Vicksburg. And on the 4th of July, 1863, one of the glorious days of my career, we marched in cadence into Vicksburg, glorious in victory. Grateful because that was also the day of our independence. On May 24th, 1863, while in a rifle pit under siege, I sustained a gunshot wound to my left arm. I knew it was quite serious, for I had no feeling and I had no movement in my arm. I was able to move back into one of the hospitals in the city, where the surgeon there confirmed my greatest fear, that my arm indeed was shattered, and that the only thing he could do for me was to amputate my arm.
George's story is really a tribute to all the wounded warriors that are out there today. because he's the story of a veteran. He's wounded during the war, but it doesn't stop him. He continues to fight as a soldier.
But by May, my arm was too weak for me to continue, and I was discharged from the Army and returned home here to Michigan.
There's nobody here to rehabilitate him, to take care of his wounds. He has to make a living on his own. Eventually he does find work on a farm, and he goes on to lead a life with his family. But it's always, for the rest of his life, very difficult for him because he has to do everything minus an arm. We see soldiers today that are in that same predicament.
As far as my service is concerned, I was very proud to be a member of the 2nd Michigan and the Union Army, and also proud to have given up a part of me, my left arm, to the cause of union and freedom.
My name is Kristen Stockflow. I was born in 1829 in Germany. At that time, I grew up with my family on a farm. We pretty much grew potatoes, grew other vegetables too.
Christian was an immigrant. It was very difficult for a younger son to make a living. Farms were very small, they could not be subdivided anymore. So the way to survive was to leave your country or join the military.
I also didn't want to join the military over there because at that time you were forced into the military and I didn't want that. So lived in Livonia for a couple of years, decided I was a fully American citizen by that time. And then the American Civil War hit. Now you ask, why did I join here but I did not join in Europe? Well, that's because it's a volunteer military here and I wanted to fight for my new homeland. And I felt like I was more of an American citizen than I was a German citizen at that time. In August of '62, we mustered out of Detroit and went down to Washington, D.C. to defend the nation's capital. I thought that was a great honor to do that. Then we were shipped out of there and we ended up moving around, doing some skirmishing with the Confederates until we got to Fredericksburg, where we ended up battling them, a major battle. I ended up surviving that battle with my company. We ended up in Chancellorsville in May of '63, and I also survived that battle. After that, we were sent to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, where I ended up getting shot. My shot was severe enough that it allowed me to be discharged in July of '64. So I came home to Livonia, where my farmland would be.
Now, Christian made a choice not to join the military in his own country, but yet he comes here, he buys land, and he fights for this country. All those immigrants to this country who fight for our country even though they could be earning a living in some other safer way, Christian serves as a tribute to them. Thank you for visiting us here today at Livonia Center Cemetery. We're located on Farmington Road between 5 Mile and Schoolcraft. There are 3 other local historical cemeteries that you might wish to visit: Briggs Cemetery on 6 Mile Road, Newburgh Cemetery on Ann Arbor Trail, and Clarenceville Cemetery on 8 Mile Road. If you wish to learn anything more about the characters that you've seen in this presentation, or you have questions about other Livonia history, please contact us at Greenmead Historical Park. We're located at 8 Mile in Newburgh.